Alright, in this video we're going to go through the basics of the calculations for each of the depreciation methods. We're going to start off with the same example we had where we are going to purchase a van for delivery, our florist delivery. The van that we're purchasing, or the delivery vehicle here we're purchasing, it has a cost of $30,000. An estimated useful life of 4 years, or 137,500 miles, and a residual value at the end of those 4 years we believe we'll be able to sell it or scrap it for $2,500. And so our job is to calculate how much of this vehicle we are going to depreciate or expense each year for the next 4 years. Depending on the method we choose, the numbers we're going to get are going to be different. So we're going to start with straight line depreciation. The straight line method calculates depreciation expense by taking the cost of the asset, subtracting the residual value, and dividing it by the useful life. If we do that, we are going to get cost of 30, residual of 2,500, which leaves us with the depreciable base of 27.5, and we divide that over the 4 years, we get depreciation expense per year of $6,875 per year. Now, if we wanted to record our depreciation entry on a monthly basis, then we would divide this by 48 months. If we were going to do it quarterly, we would do 16 quarters. And that's how we would come up with the amounts for each adjusting entry that we would need. But in this case, we're just looking at annual numbers. And so my depreciation expense under straight line is going to be $6,875 each year. Now if I do that, the total is $27,500, which is equal to my depreciable base. Right? That's the amount that I am depreciating, expensing. So that's how straight line works. Fairly simple. You take the cost, you subtract the residual, you divide it by the useful life. Units of production works a little bit differently. In units of production depreciation, we are going to calculate a depreciation rate. Now, we can actually determine a depreciation rate for straight line too. Maybe I'll do these in different colors. That'll be easier. So, on straight line, the depreciation rate is calculated by taking 1 divided by the useful life. And so in straight line, the rate is 1 over 4, or 20%. For our example, 20% per year. For 4 years, sorry, not 20%. Better get my math right. It's 25%. So 25% per year for 4 years. So 25, 50, 75, 100. That gets us to 100%. But that's our straight line rate. So you can do straight line by a rate as well. You just take the rate, 25%, times the depreciable base, which is cost minus residual value, and you get your numbers for each year. Straight line is the most common. The reason it's the most common is because it's the easiest and it's the most predictable. If we look at units of production, it works a little bit differently. In units of production, we are going to calculate a depreciation rate. We're going to do that by taking the cost of the asset, subtracting the residual value, and dividing it by the estimated total production that we expect to get from the asset. That could be a number of units, could be a number of hours, and in our case, we have 30,000 as the cost, the residual is 2,500, and we expect to get 137,500 miles out of this vehicle. And so we get a rate, if we do the math, of 20 cents per mile. Now that's not the amount of my expense for this year. It is the amount I'm going to record for each mile I drive. So we're going to create a table over here. In 2020, we are going to say that we drove 36,000 miles. And so we're going to expense $7,200 that year. In 2021, we drove 42,000 miles. Times 20 cents gives us $8,400 in depreciation expense. In 2022, we drove 35,700 miles. Times our depreciation rate, we get $7,140. And then in 2023, we drove 23.8, or once we hit 23.8, then we stop because we have gotten to our 4760 of depreciation. That gives us the total of 27.5, which is our depreciable base. That's how much we're depreciating. So for units of production, in 2020, it was 7,200. 2021, 8,400. 2022, 7,140. And 2023, 4,760. And so in total, just like straight line, how much did I depreciate? 27.5, which is my depreciable base. The 30,000 in cost minus the residual value. The next two depreciation methods that we are going to look at are what are called accelerated depreciation methods. So the accelerated methods basically exist because they allow us to take more expense up front and less expense later. The first one we're going to look at is the declining balance methods. Now, most of the time, the one that's most common is the double declining balance method. You can do 1.5 times declining balance. You can do 1.25 declining balance, but double declining is the one we see the most. So, to do this, it works a little bit differently. We're going to look at each year. So in 2020, what was the book value at the beginning of that year? Well, the book value, which is cost minus accumulated depreciation, the book value was 30,000. This is my cost. Why? Because I hadn't depreciated anything yet. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take that times the double declining rate. The double declining rate is calculated by doubling the straight line rate. So we saw the straight line rate was 25%. So we take that times 2 and we get 50%. We can also simply take 2 over the useful life, which is 2 over 4, and we get 50% as well. So there's a couple different ways you can calculate that double declining rate. So we're going to take that 30,000 times 50%, that's going to get us the depreciation expense for the year, $15,000. Then I want to know, what is my accumulated depreciation then at the end of that year? Well, it would be $15,000. I haven't depreciated anything yet, so that's it. So my book value at the end, if my book value at the beginning was 30, and I just took away 15 as an expense 15, then my book value at the end is 15. Now, these numbers aren't always going to match the expense and the book value, but since we're having it here, right, 50%, that's the way they come out. So at the end of at the beginning of 2021, what's the book value? Well, it's 15,000. It's what I finished last year with. Take that times my 50%, and what do I get? I get 7,500. What have I accumulated then? Well, I had 15 last year and 7,500 this year, so I've got 22,500 accumulated. My book value at the beginning of the year was 15. I just took away 75 more, so my book value at the end is 75. In 2022, my book value starting is 75. I take that times my rate, and I get 37.50. Additional 37.50 on top of my 22.5, I get 26.250. How much do I have as a book value at the end then? Well, if I take my $7,500 beginning book value and subtract my depreciation expense for this year, then I have a $37.50 book value at the end of this year. And then in the last year, 2023, what do I have? Well, I start with a book value of $37.50. I take that times my rate of 50%, and I get a depreciation expense of $18.75. I've accumulated as a result $28,125, and my book value at the end is $18.75. But I have a slight problem, because this book value at the end needs to equal my residual value. My residual value is $2,500. So I can't follow the rules in this last year. Can't do that. What do I need to do? Well, I know that I need to have a residual value of $2,500. That needs to be my book value at the end of the year. I've accumulated $26,250. My book value starting the year is $37.5. So my book value starting the year is $37.5. My book value at the end of the year needs to be $2,500. So how much can I depreciate? Well, I can only depreciate $1,250. If I depreciate $1,250 and add that to what I've already depreciated, $26,250, right? Then what do I have at the end? What do I have at the end? I have $27.5, which is my depreciable base. That's how much I should have depreciated. So I'm left with a residual of $2,500. So often in double declining, or even 1.5 times declining or others, we have to fix the last year so that it comes out the way that it's supposed to. Now, if we go back up to our top here, in double declining balance, what are my numbers? In the first year, it was $15,000. And then it was $7,500. And then it was $37.50. And then it was $12.50. Again, all adding up to $27.5, which is our depreciable base. So each method is going to get us to the same end point. The last method that we're going to talk about is a crazy method. Not too many companies use this, but it is a method that is available, and it is called sum of years digits. The sum of years digits method works by taking the years remaining at the beginning of the period and dividing it by the sum of years digits. Now, you say, well, what is that? Well, that's going to give us our depreciation rate for each year. Okay? The sum of years digits, in our case here, we have a useful life of 4 years. And so the sum of years digits is calculated by taking 4 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1, which gives us 10. So that's going to be our denominator. You can also calculate this by taking the number of years in your useful life times the number of years in your useful life plus 1 and dividing it by 2. So that's a little bit easier way to do it if you have a big useful life or a long useful life. So what would that look like for us? We would take 4 times 4 plus 1, which is 5, divided by 2. So 4 times 5 is 20, divided by 2 gives us 10. So we get the same number. Now, how do we do this for each of these years? Well, in 2020, how many years are remaining? Well, there's 4 years remaining out of the 10-year sum of years digits, which means in 2020 we're going to multiply something times 40%. In 2021, 3 years remain, so that's 30%. In 2022, 2 years remain, so that is 20%. And in 2023, 3 years remain, 1 year remains, so that's 10%. And so in total, we should have how much? We should have 100%. Now, what do we multiply these values by? Well, we multiply these rates times the depreciable base. And so our depreciable base is 27.5. That's the amount that we are depreciating. So our depreciation expense for each year for 2020 will be $11,000. For 2022 will be $8,250. 2021. For 2022 it'll be $5,500. And for 2023 will be $2,750. And so if we add all of these values together, we should get $27,500, our depreciable base. So I'm going to subtract from my income statement, right, my depreciation expense, if I'm using sum of years digits, $11,000 in year 1, $8,250 in year 2, $5,500 in year 3, and $2,750 in year 4. All together adding up to $27,500. So again, it doesn't matter which method we choose. All of the methods are going to get us to the same endpoint. This also highlights the fact that we are not determining the market value of the van or delivery vehicle, because each year we're expensing different amounts. Now, are we using the van any differently in each of these individual years? Am I using the van differently if I use straight line depreciation or sum of years digits depreciation? No, I'm not using the van any differently. And so this just gives us a different way, right? Different ways to calculate and record depreciation. Now, what are the benefits? Well, straight line's simple and it's predictable. Same amount every year. Units of production aligns with how much we use the asset. Double declining and sum of years digits allow us to take more depreciation on the front end and less on the back end which often is advantageous to us for tax purposes, especially for a startup. And so, no matter what method we choose, we're going to get to the same place. And each method is going to require us to record the same journal entry, right? What do we record? We record depreciation expense and accumulated depreciation. It doesn't matter which method we're using, that's going to be our entry. Now, as we talked about in a previous video, in the manufacturing setting, it could be a little bit different. But generally speaking, this is the entry that we would make for our delivery vehicle.